Have you ever felt like you were on the verge of a major transformation, but couldn't quite understand what God was doing in your life? What if I told you that these challenges might actually be a clear sign that God is preparing you for a breakthrough? Just like a potter carefully shapes the clay, God is molding your life, and even though the process may be painful, it has a divine purpose. In times of hardship and struggle, you're being prepared for something greater, something that can change not just your life, but also the lives of those around you. If you're going through this season right now, take a deep breath and stand firm. A major shift is coming. Get ready to discover what He is doing behind the scenes. In the next few minutes, we'll explore how you can better understand His process and, more importantly, how you can align yourself with God's plan for your life. If you're seeking wisdom, wanting to understand God's purpose for you, and learning how He uses pain as a tool for transformation, stay with us. Before we continue, like this video and subscribe to the channel, as we'll be sharing powerful insights that could be the key to your spiritual breakthrough. And don't forget to comment below with this declaration: I am ready for the breakthrough God has for me. Let's walk this journey together. Many people see hardships as a sign that something is wrong. But what if it's the exact opposite? God, like a potter, carefully shapes every detail of the life of someone He intends to use powerfully. Brokenness is not punishment, it's preparation. Spiritual pruning, no matter how painful, removes what hinders growth and makes room for something greater. Have you ever noticed how pruned trees bloom even more beautifully? The same happens to those who surrender to God's process. Spiritual growth requires surrender, and that doesn't always feel comfortable. God allows challenges that force us to trust Him, often removing supports we once thought were essential. Imagine someone who has always relied on their intellect, suddenly needing to depend entirely on divine guidance. This kind of shaping is necessary so that His purpose can be fulfilled without human resistance. When everything seems to fall apart, it's often God tearing down weak foundations to build something unshakable. Going through this process can feel like losing, but in reality, it's refinement. Pure gold only emerges after intense fire. Transformation happens when there is true surrender. Resisting the process only prolongs the pain. Embracing it accelerates spiritual growth. But does all pain have a purpose? How can we tell the difference between ordinary suffering and divine preparation? That's where understanding the role of pain becomes essential. Pain plays a powerful role in spiritual breakthrough. While most people try to avoid it at all costs, God often uses it as a megaphone to get our attention. When life is smooth, it's easy to grow complacent, but when difficulties arise, our hearts are drawn to seek answers. This was true for so many biblical figures, including Jesus Himself in John 12, where He said that a grain of wheat must fall to the ground and die in order to bear fruit. In other words, some losses are actually the key to an abundant harvest. In moments of deep vulnerability, God's voice becomes clearer. Pain exposes hidden weaknesses, revealing areas that need healing and growth. Think about pruning a vine. Cutting it back may seem like a setback, but it's actually what ensures a stronger, more fruitful future. The same is true spiritually. When circumstances press in, our dependence on God increases. How many people only started praying sincerely after going through a crisis? That's no coincidence. The problem is that many see pain as punishment, when in reality it can be an instrument for growth. The desert is not the final destination, it's the pathway to something greater. What looks like a delay might actually be divine training. Joseph was betrayed and sold into slavery, but that process prepared him to lead a nation. How many times has God tried to teach you something through a difficult season? Maybe it's time to look back and recognize what He has already begun. Joseph's story is a classic example of how brokenness precedes greatness. Betrayed by his own brothers, Sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned, he had every reason to become bitter. But God was using each trial to shape him. When he finally stepped into a position of leadership in Egypt, Joseph didn't just save a nation from famine, he also restored his own family. His suffering wasn't the end of the story. It was the pathway to fulfilling God's purpose. David also didn't reach the throne without first enduring a long season of hardship and complete dependence on God. Before becoming king, he was hunted, humiliated, and forced to live on the run. But it was during this time that he developed an unshakable trust in the Lord. Every cave he hid in became a classroom where he learned surrender, patience, and spiritual authority. The preparation process always feels long, but when breakthrough finally comes, everything makes sense. These examples show that spiritual growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. The fire of adversity refines character and prepares us for great breakthroughs. Those who resist the process miss the opportunity to bear fruit. God never wastes pain, He transforms it. And when that transformation happens, a life begins to bear fruit, not for personal glory, but to serve His divine purpose. After all, what's the point of being shaped if not to impact the lives of others? Everything God does has a greater purpose, and brokenness is no exception. The end goal isn't just to endure pain, but to produce fruit that glorifies God and impacts others. A tree doesn't bear fruit for itself, but to nourish those around it. In the same way, those who go through spiritual pruning become sources of wisdom, service, and transformation. Those who have overcome great challenges have the authority to strengthen others. Bearing fruit can take many forms: words of encouragement, acts of love, or a life that inspires. But this doesn't happen automatically. It requires a willingness to live in holiness, allowing God to shape every detail. John 15 makes it clear, the branch that bears fruit is pruned so it can produce even more. This means that even after growth, the refining process continues. God doesn't want temporary fruitfulness, He wants lasting impact. When someone realizes that their journey isn't just about themselves, but about serving God's purpose, everything changes. The season of preparation makes sense, pain turns into wisdom, and spiritual growth becomes evident. But the real question is, how do we cooperate with this process? How do we stop resisting what God is doing? That's where surrender comes in. Being willing to let God prune whatever is holding us back from greater breakthroughs. Resisting the process only prolongs the pain. When God starts to shape someone, the biggest mistake is trying to hold on to what He has already decided to remove. Surrender is an act of trust, a recognition that His will is better, even when it doesn't make sense. This requires constant prayer, a willingness to learn, and the courage to let go of anything that hinders growth. How often do we cling to relationships, habits, or mindsets that God has already shown us need to go? Cooperating with God's plan also means stepping into service. The idea of waiting until we feel ready is an illusion. Spiritual growth happens in movement, in surrender, in serving, even in the midst of challenges. Moses didn't think he was capable, yet God used him while he was still insecure. The same applies to anyone seeking to grow. Serving, loving, and obeying accelerate the process. The key question is, what can I do today to align my life with God's purpose? Finally, it's essential to allow God to reveal what needs to be pruned. This can happen through specific prayers, asking, Lord, what in me is still resisting your will? Often, the answer comes through scripture, wise counsel, or even circumstances that expose our weaknesses. Growth begins when we stop fighting the process and start flowing with it. And when that happens, spiritual breakthrough becomes inevitable. Now that you understand the signs that God is preparing you for a major breakthrough, the real question is, what will you do with this knowledge? The challenges you're facing aren't roadblocks. They're essential steps in your spiritual growth. You can choose to resist the process or surrender to God's shaping, allowing Him to complete His work in your life. The power lies in how you respond to this transformation. So I challenge you, what areas of your life do you need to surrender to God so He can prune and shape you? What are you willing to leave behind to move forward in His plan? Remember, bearing fruit isn't about your own glory, it's about impacting others. Your life has a greater purpose than you may realize. If you're ready to see this transformation unfold, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep learning with us. There's so much more to explore and discover about God's plan for your life. See you in the next video.